Okay, so I may get a little passionate, a little. Uh, I may talk a lot about this particular section, so we'll see. This is what are indicators of high quality e-learning. Okay, so I get very passionate about this because I feel like these are the things that really will make or break your training, your e-learning, your program for online. Okay, and so some people can cover these, and it's some of it gets left out though. And so I think when you can really um, hone your approach and really develop um, your techniques or gathering that information for some of these key areas, it's really going to help you out. Okay. So, and even from that's what I was saying at the beginning with those questions, to think about what makes it good, what makes e-learning effective for you, what makes you really enjoy something online, because engagement is a huge component of what can make or break a course. Okay, so here's some things I want you to think about that we're going to just kind of high level talk over in this little lesson here. What makes e-learning good? More importantly, what makes e-learning engaging and effective for the learner audience? Okay, I'm going to keep saying these terms over and over. Engaging, it has your attention, it has the learner's attention, and effective. Is it doing or is going to do what you meant it to do with the instruction, with the knowledge, with the skills? Effectiveness is we want the learner to use it, preferably right away, preferably right after they've finished that course or the series of courses, and to continue using it uh, and using it correctly. Okay, so I want you to keep thinking about those two things, engaging and effective. So let's examine some key areas here of components that will hopefully ensure e-learning not only engages learners, but also builds their confidence and equips them to apply new skills right away. Confidence. You want to give your learners, um, depending on what the area is, they may feel really apprehensive about using this skill. A lot technology and computer skills comes to mind right away because I did a training, or I was in a work position. It's been a little while now, but it was helping people understand a new computer system that they use, like that, something they use every day that is now completely different, completely new, looks different, uses a mouse versus uses keyboard commands, and things like that, and people of all ages and backgrounds. Okay, so you're gonna have people who are gonna be very apprehensive, who are going to feel uncomfortable with some new skills that is being required of them, and to give them confidence and to really show them that they're capable of doing that is huge on getting your workers, your employees, or whoever it is, to start doing this thing that they that will really help them with their job. Okay, so areas we're going to focus on. I'm already talking a lot about this, just like I said. Incentive and engagement, content design and structure, visual and media design, technical functionality, assessments and evaluations, and the last one here, additional considerations. So, in a way, these are like five, but if you want to consider the sixth one, which is additional considerations, these are 5 to 6 key areas that you can keep coming back to. With, have we covered this? Have we thought about it? Have we planned it? Have we asked the right questions? These are these areas. Okay, so incentive and engagement. This is coming from the instructional design world of working with students, working with your learner audience, and making sure that they are absorbing the material. Okay, this has been around for anything that involves education. This is a component of that, but again, we're thinking of it from the perspective of e-learning and the digital space. Okay, so incentivizing, this is not even education, this is kind of people in general. This also goes with a lot of psychology stuff is kind of behind this. If you want someone to do something, they have to be incentivized, they have to want to do it for a particular reason, whether it's for their own learning, Like, hey, someone just enjoys learning, they want to better themselves. Awesome. They're already off to a good start. But it could be things like I have here. Uh, it's for personal growth. It could be for career advancement, learning new job skills, or some type of a reward. Maybe you just even incentivize whoever completes this course, we will pick, random 5 people and they get a $10 gift card. It could be whoever does this, it'll go on kind of your employee records because you've completed it, or you'll be invited to do something if you complete this. So something that makes sense for your situation or the people that you're catering this towards. So learners need motivation or incentives such as personal growth, career advancement, or rewards to stay engaged and complete an online course. They have to want to complete it for a particular reason. You have to give them that reason if it is not obvious, okay? Recognizing achievements and aligning course benefits with learner goals fosters commitment and enhances the learning experience. By maintaining interest and demonstrating clear value, you create a course that motivates learners to succeed. Okay, so you kind of have to really, if the course does it on its own and it's already very engaging, that's awesome. But if you're like, this is really dry material, this is very hard material for anybody to get through, you have to kind of push and put in some tactics that will make sense, that will work for them, and allow them to more easily complete the course instead of kind of trudging through it or kind of spacing out through 60 minutes of someone talking to them on a video with slideshows, and then they don't really get a whole lot out of it by the end, okay? And then engagement. Okay, so engagement is different than incentivizing, but engagement would be things that make it more interesting, more attention grabbing for your learners. Okay, some short list of recommendations here could be interactive elements such as quizzes, of course, all online stuff. Okay, online quizzes, knowledge checks, little interactions, drag and drop activities where you're taking one thing and you're matching it with something else. I've had a lot of good reviews about stuff like that. Or simulation. Simulation would be maybe learning something online. A new software or website comes to mind for simulations where you're not on the actual page or the thing or the software, but you are manipulating your course so that the learner can actually drag things. They can click on stuff and appears. That's a simulation. Okay, when they're not in the real environment, you're doing it in a kind of this copy environment. Okay, scenarios and case studies. This engages learners by simulating real world challenges. Scenarios are things that are like taking a little story or a little situation and saying, what would you do? Okay, like so and so is in their work setting and their coworker comes up to them and says this or that, and then what do you do, right? Or what is the appropriate choice here, or and then case study would be something where it's actually been studied and researched in that particular line of work that you're referencing. Okay, those have become very I think they're very beneficial, so I would try to recommend those, squeeze those in if you can. Opportunities for reflection. This is an instructional design thing again, where encouraging learners to connect material to their experiences. Journal prompts, reflection questions. I did this to you at the beginning when I was trying to get you to reflect on your own experiences. This is taking the material and putting a bridge into that person's own life. Okay, so saying, hey, this is relevant, and we're creating this bridge of how this fits into what you're doing in your work or your life. Okay, immediate feedback provides constructive feedback on assessments or activities. This is saying, hey, this is what you made a mistake on and here's what happened, or hey, did a good job, this is why that's correct, and refreshing that information again, and maybe like a slightly modified sentence or new way of, but it's the feedback of, yes, you did this correctly, or no, you didn't, but here's how we can fix it. Okay, and then gamification. Gamification is anything that's game related. These are things, I can go on and on about this kind of stuff too, but this is stuff like points, badges, leaderboards, or gaming type things in general, rewards, digital rewards, stuff like that. Okay, so those are some ideas. All right, and then getting into content and structure. Okay, so content design and structure is number 2 here. When thinking and planning out the elements and organization for course content, consider the following best practices. So, this, what I mean by content and structure, is the flow of your course, or it could be an entire program. Um, it's how it's organized. Does it make sense logically, and for someone to go through it front to back? Um, how are you putting things in a certain order so that it makes sense and builds off of, that previous thing? Okay, so um, that's why I'd said earlier about learning objectives, because that's going to drive the direction, and then what particular order you put topics in, that's kind of, past, uh, after you've created your objectives, you will now start to put in, here are the lessons, and here's what order I want those lessons to go in, because this is what makes the most sense. So create clear learning objectives. Each module has well-defined and measurable objectives. So your course can have objectives, but you can also think of the lesson too of having objectives. And whether you put objectives, or here's what you will be learning in this lesson. I do that a lot, and I think that's a good thing. Is so the learner knows what to expect, what's coming up, and then you can always refresh those key points at the end of a lesson and at the end of the course. That's what I recommend. Okay, so integrate a logical flow. Content is presented in a clear, logical sequence that builds on previous material. And this should be a given, if you have an educational background or you've been teaching or things like that, kind of a given. Hopefully you think about this, but it's a reminder, or it's to get someone to think about it who hasn't thought about it before, of do you even have an introduction? I think that, and to kind of get someone warmed up to this, or do you just like jump right in already, and just start presenting like, so I definitely think that there is something to, and you kind of, as a professional, you will develop your own preferences of, this is the order I like to go in, or these are the things I like to put in. But I think it's so important to think about the flow, as well as testing out the flow and getting opinions and people who have maybe taken it who are not you, and saying, and getting their opinion, like, did that make sense? And maybe they might say, well, I feel like this lesson was not, it didn't feel like it was in the right place, or this content didn't feel like it belongs here. It just felt like it was kind of an outlier of what was talked about in that lesson. And so those are things to think about, because that would throw off your learner. Okay. Ensure relevance. Content is aligned with learner needs and real world applications. I can tell you that employees or staff or whoever you're teaching really appreciate that it's relevant to what they're doing. It connects with them more, and it makes it more worth their time if they know that what they're learning is going to help them with what they do on a daily basis, or with the people they work with. But the other thing to that too is, it's really a testament to you as either the developer or the designer or the facilitator or whoever, instructor, that you know your stuff. So if it is relevant and your content is like, really resonates with them, of like, oh yeah, I just actually came across a customer who was like that, like yesterday. They know that you know your stuff if they can really make those ties of like, oh yeah, that happened to me too. And so this is how I know this content is really designed for me and what I'm doing. Okay. Select concise and focused material. So your course would avoid unnecessary information, and you would want to focus on key takeaways. Okay, so this is definitely a common problem, but it's fine. A common problem of like, hey, we have all this information. What should actually fit into the course, and what do you legitimately need to leave out because there's not enough time, or it's irrelevant, or we need to do like a another like intermediate level versus a foundational level of this content. Huge factor of like, hey, here's all this information and material for this topic. What are we using, and what needs to be thrown out or saved for later? Okay. Validate that information is accurate and updated. Content is factually correct and up to date. So, pretty self explanatory, other than I'll just say that you definitely want to vet your content for accuracy. For all kinds of things and for all kinds of reasons. Is it up to policy? Is it up to the best practice? Is it up to, modern technology? Is it up to date with what you're currently doing in your organization? Or like, is it a term that is no longer used, or something needs to be rewarded because it's now kind of not a polite way of saying that phrasing anymore, So this is something where you would want to revisit your content. You create it, or you may be using old I want to say training manuals, but even old documents from 10 years ago. You want to look through that and make sure that it's still good to go before you put a new version of it online. And then as you're vetting your course in the future, if you continue to use that course and have it posted, is you want to look at it every every year, periodically, a year and a half, 2 years at the most, and make sure, is that information still accurate and updated and correct. Okay. All right, next here, visual media and design. So we'll be going over this a little bit. Again, this is a high level course, and so I can talk about these things at nauseum in a way. But this is kind of your graphic design in a way, kind of thinking about graphic design, also thinking about learning experience, UX, user experience. This is incorporating that into e-learning. Okay, so even your education expertise is hopefully pretty strong, but you may be intimidated by some of the visual, graphic, digital elements that go into e-learning. But it doesn't have to be, but you should be aware of some kind of key concepts. Okay, so consider the following when deciding on digital elements. Professional visuals, graphics, and images are high quality and support learning objectives. And again, I can kind of go deep dive into these at another time, but make sure your graphics don't look like they're from like 1999. Because that definitely exists, I'm sure you know. Or like graphics, evolve, and looks and design evolve very quickly online. And so you want to make sure that it does look modern as possible, or fairly evergreen, as in some things, some styles, looks just, kind of stay the same for longer periods of time than others. Accessible media. Videos and audio include captions or transcripts. So accessible, that is going to mean that learners of different backgrounds, abilities, impairments, that they can access it. So if they're hard of hearing, you should always include closed captions, but it's not just for people who are completely deaf. It's also people who have hard of hearing, or they may need to have their sound off. There's all kinds of reasons for it, as well as for transcripts. Okay. Consistent branding. Design follows a cohesive theme or style guide. So a lot of places you are going to have your company colors, your company branding, marketing, and follow those color codes, those font styles, et cetera, et cetera. But if you don't, if you are an entrepreneur, develop your own, even if it's something just very basic, like I'm just going to use blues. But, try and make the colors match as much as possible. It makes it look way, way cleaner, as well as include logos as needed for that company. Okay. Minimal cognitive load. So design avoids excessive visuals or distractions. This would be things like excessive animation, excessive like flashing or colors, or too many pictures. That is drawing the learner in so many different directions when they should be focused on the material itself. Mobile friendly design. E-learning is optimized for different devices and screen sizes. So what this basically comes down to is, if someone is not doing their training or taking their course on a laptop or a computer, maybe they're taking it on just their phone. Or, they're on their phone because they're not in a typical office environment. They may be out in the field, and their phone is a primary way for them to get information. So your course should adapt and be able to look okay and be easy to use on something like a phone or a tablet. That's what that's referring to. Okay, moving on. Okay. Our next topic here is technical functionality. So, this should be pretty self-explanatory, but in a nutshell, technical functionality is the technology functional for your learner. This is going to incorporate things, all kinds of stuff. Your LMS, your software, your digital files. Can they open it? Is something broken? Is something not easy to navigate? Internet access. Can they hear the audio well? Is something visible? Like that's your technical functionality, is to think about those things and to test them, and to test them on different devices, being used by different people. Okay, not just you, because it may work fine for you on your laptop, on your internet connection, on your setup, but ask someone else to do it on a Mac, and now you might be running into a problem, or vice versa. Okay, so be aware of some of these things, gives you something to think about, as well as put it on your checklist to test before you distribute it to your larger audience. Okay, pay special attention to these technical requirements to help maximize a learner's online course experience. Responsive navigation. Learners can easily navigate through the course. That means if they click a button, is it going to load easily, quickly, or not? Okay. Navigation is anything where we're clicking on menus, we're going forwards and backwards, stuff like that. Minimal load times, kind of just what I was saying. Content loads quickly without technical glitches. Although this is way, way better than it was as the years progress. We have faster internet, we have faster machines, and that's great, but that's for you. And maybe you have a learner who is more in a rural environment or away from a major city. Their internet connection is just not as fast, or it's not available to where they live, or they're on an older machine or device, and it just, or browser, or all kinds of things, or it's not updated. There's definitely reasons for this, and to try and mitigate that as much as possible, or at least be aware of it. And that's why you want to be mindful of, like, yeah, you may want to include all the cool, like videos and animation, or kind of neat things, but does that work well for everybody? If you include a long video, how much bandwidth does that other person have on the other end, and will they be able to watch it, kind of thing? Okay. Progress tracking. Learners are able to track their completion status. So this is something where learners just should be able to know where they're at in a course, or how much, or that they completed it and received credit. Progress bars, or little awards, or kind of some of your badging systems goes along with this too. But it's for learners to understand where they're at in the process of that course, or that series of courses. Okay. Cross-browser compatibility. An online course works on multiple browsers without issues. I've definitely ran into this, where in various situations, Chrome versus Internet Explorer versus Safari on Mac versus a Mac computer or laptop versus Windows, and the operating systems. All kinds. So and then this kind of goes down your troubleshooting rabbit hole of, like, yeah, if it's not working for one person, where is the problem? It could be a browser thing, it could be a clear your cache kind of thing, it could be an update your browser kind of thing. It could be, that software is not super friendly on that type of computer. So even though it sounds, if you're not techie, this sounds very intimidating to understand this stuff. So that's why, but be aware of it. And if there is someone on your team, or someone in a different department who can kind of help you think through these things, then by all means, so that'll help you out. Okay. SCORM or XAPI compliant. These are the file formats. I don't want to deep dive into this too much and confuse you if you're not familiar with these things. So we have either of these course output file formats ensures compatibility with learning management systems or LMSs. So SCORM is the output for something like an Articulate Storyline, where you have a course software, the output, that you put that in as a final file format, and you upload the SCORM onto the LMS. Okay, that's what it is. That's the file. But as you're working with it, it's a working file. But when you're done with it, you publish it, and it becomes SCORM, which is what I usually use, or it can be the XAPI. And then that is the file format that it gets loaded and onto something like an LMS. Okay, so and making sure that those are, like if you're putting the working file onto your LMS, and you're like, why is it not working? It's because it wasn't published. It wasn't put into the correct file format. And of course, the LMS is not understanding and registering that particular file. Okay, and what to do with it. All right, next one here is assessments and evaluations. So this is another component you should be thinking about. This is a whole instructional design education sort of area, right? Is assessments and evaluations, quizzes, knowledge checks. Did you pass the course or not? I will definitely be doing a whole thing about this at some point, because it is researched. There is a lot to say about it, and it can be done using best practices. But from what I have seen over the past few years, most of assessments are not done using best practices, which is extremely unfortunate, because it is a detriment to your learners as well as to the thing that you just created, and being able to test or assess if learners have understood the content. And questions and how you create your questions and how you score something is a huge contributing factor of what kind of information you're trying to get out of the success of that course, or if the learner has learned what you needed them to. Okay, so a good best practice, some things to keep in mind. Again, this is a whole large area of information, but just some things high level here for you to keep in mind. Varied assessments include different types of questions. You might have some multiple choice. You might have some short answer. You may have some, I was about to say true, false. True, false is a type of multiple choice, but you can vary what types of questions you're getting the learner to do, okay? And there's different benefits to using varied types of questions. Clear grading criteria. Learners should understand how assessments are evaluated. Most times people stick with very simplistic, correct, incorrect, out of 10 questions. How many did you get correct? How many are incorrect? Grading can definitely be done on a scale. It can be done on a point system. There are reasons why you would or would not want to use a point system. And so I'm not going to go down that, but just be aware that there are ways you can, different ways you can evaluate. Or it's a pass fail, or it's a complete or incomplete. It kind of the whole spectrum of grading and completion. Opportunities for practice include formative assessments to reinforce learning. And then I have C note below. If you don't know what a formative assessment, this is what it is. Formative assessments are evaluations conducted during the learning process to monitor learners' understanding, identify areas for improvement, and provide immediate feedback. Okay, this would be something like a knowledge check. It could be a pre-test. It could be, a little quiz or question at the end of each lesson to gauge either for you on the administrative side, or for that learner to understand their own their own success at that point, or how much they're gaining, or where they're starting from. That's a good reason for a pretest, is where are we even starting from before we go into the new content. Okay. A summative assessment would be at the end of a course, what you would think of as like a final assessment, a final test at the end of the course, receiving credit or a grade, possibly. Okay. Knowledge application encourages learners to apply what they've learned in real world contexts. So this is like next steps. This is a what do I do now? Or what steps can I take now? Or what's next? Further learning. How do I apply this? And to give them, a list or ideas of how to apply that information right away. And then post-course feedback collects learner input for future improvements, such as an end-of-course survey. Getting the learner's opinion. Did you enjoy it? What did you like about it? What did you not like about it? How can we improve it? And there's definitely, some positives for having some surveys if you can. All right. So our kind of our sixth area here that I want you think about is just additional considerations. Okay. So I just covered the kind of the five main areas that I think about and I think are helpful. Our last one here is kind of some extra things if you're able to, but hopefully will. First one up is accessibility. So I've mentioned this and we'll continue to mention it. Is ensuring your course is inclusive by meeting diverse learner needs, including compatibility with assistive technologies, clear navigation, and adherence to accessibility standards. For example, the WCAG, those standards. Okay, happy to talk accessibility in another course. I really enjoy learning more about it myself, as well as how to apply it and telling others how to apply it. But try and at least do some base level things, and then as you learn more about accessibility, incorporate those as much as possible. Okay. So that should be something that should be part of your strategy, part of some of the questions you ask, and part of your development process is accessible learning. And some places, and as time goes on, it's going to be more and more places, workplaces, it's a requirement to have accessible learning. Okay. And to make, because we don't want to leave people out, and that totally makes sense. We don't want people to not have kind of a rich experience with their learning. Okay. So practical application is another thing you can think about. Integrate real world projects, case studies, or scenarios that learners practice and apply what they've learned in realistic settings. And we've kind of covered this in various ways, but it's another reminder of like, what are they doing after that course ends? How are they applying what skills that you just taught them? How are they doing that? And what are recommended ways for them to start? If they feel like they understand the content really well, but they're like not sure how to apply it, or suggestions in their day-to-day tasks of how to apply it, feed them that, give them that. Feed them some extra information of like, here's some suggestions for how you can start using this right away. Okay. Cultural relevance. Design content that respects and reflects the cultural backgrounds and experiences of your learners to make it more relatable and impactful. I can go in a lot of different directions with this. I feel like I have a really, a pretty robust knowledge of working with so many different learners over the years from so many different cultures, and I get very passionate about this as well. But it's understanding, knowing, respecting, and trying to incorporate that into your learning of those different backgrounds, of language barriers, of kind of just a random thing that comes to mind is trying not to use a lot of slang or idioms or unfamiliar terms that people who are non-native English speakers would not be familiar with, because that really ruins the flow of how they interpret that information if they have to stop, look it up, come back to your course. Or it feels some like insider knowledge that they don't have. Other things too would just be using culturally sensitive pictures, culturally sensitive references that is not offensive to people, or that bears different cultures and people with different backgrounds in mind, and is not insensitive, as much as possible, that you can kind of mitigate that. Definitely recommend those things, and that takes your own knowledge of self-learning, or if you have someone from your team that can provide you some insight of from a certain community or group, LGBTQ community, and getting someone to look at it and be like, is this seem okay? I wrote this, or I developed it this way. How does this appear to you, or what would you do differently? Okay. Personalization. Incorporate adaptive learning paths or options that allow learners to customize their learning experience based on preferences, skill levels, or goals. Kind of this, I know it's a little vague when, the term like adaptive learning, but this is kind of going along what I would think of as accommodating learners, but also If someone has a set of knowledge and they can skip past a lesson or two because they have that knowledge, then maybe let them. Maybe it could be a good refresher, but also if it's not necessary for them to cover a course or cover a lesson because they're good, figure out a way that they can bypass that. Give them a little knowledge check or something where they can bypass it because they're already set and they can continue on. Okay, so that's just one example. Or branching. If you're familiar with what branching is, allow them to choose where they want to go first. And that's okay too. Some courses lend itself to needing to go in a particular order, but there could be some exercises or some lessons or even the course itself where it's like, yeah, kind of once you covered this first intro or lesson, we're allowing you to go in different directions as long as you cover everything. Okay. So that's kind of some examples of that. Support and community here provide opportunities for peer interaction, discussion forums, or access to mentors or instructors to create a sense of community and support. And so I am highly recommending this one because for my own projects and work experiences over the past few years, I've ran across this one in multiple places under multiple courses, audiences. People like to connect with others, and that's a given. That's a human need. And that has been kind of taken away in the online world, where we really need to try and put in some opportunities for classmates to interact with each other. And this was from business, starter, small business, entrepreneur, foundational class where people really want to be able to talk about their experiences, and someone may hear that and be like, oh yeah, that happened to me too, or I run across that and here's what I did, and share. People love that. And so the more you can, either if it's through a discussion, a live discussion online or in person, or through discussion forums through something like your LMS, or other means, kind of get creative here. You can put those in, find a way to allow people to share with each other. And this is also one of those education or instruction design techniques where someone who is a learner, if they can teach what they have just learned to someone else, that's an excellent way for them to strengthen what they just learned and strengthen their own knowledge is by teaching someone else. And opportunities for them to do that is definitely recommended. Okay. Retention and reinforcement include spaced repetition, summary sections, or job aids to help learners retain and apply the material over time. I consider this one as supplemental material. I consider it as something like workbooks, job aids, one-pagers, PDFs, visuals, infographics, things like that. Okay, a lot of different directions you can go with this, but it's reinforcement. Emotional engagement. Use storytelling, relatable examples, or emotional triggers to connect learners with the content on a deeper level. I I've been trickling some of these concepts in as I've been talking of make sure it's relatable, make sure people can, if they have experiences and want to talk about it, do that. Or a real world or a real work experience example, those can lend itself those things can lend themselves well into the content of here's why you should do this. Maybe it's like anti-harassment because this happened actually at our workplace and this was the result of that. Here's how we're trying to prevent it. Okay, so that's kind of an example there. Data-driven design, leverage analytics to monitor learner progress, identify challenges, and continuously refine content for better outcomes. So this is a lot of different directions you can go with this. One example that comes to mind is if you're noticing all your learners are kind of stopping around a particular area or a particular lesson, or they only get like 30% or 50% through. Why? Why is that? Are they stopping for a particular reason? And find out why that is. Or something they're not finishing, or something that, like a question everyone is getting wrong. Figure out why and then fix it. Technical stability. Ensure your platform is reliable with minimal downtime, smooth functionality, and consistent user experience across devices and browsers. This is making sure all your tech is working good, kind of like what we've already talked about. Okay. Okay, and for this lesson here, which I did spend quite a bit of time on, but I think it's really going to help you out foundationally, um, with indicators of high quality e-learning. So to summarize this, these indicators ensure e-learning is engaging, accessible, and effective in meeting its learning objectives. So next up, we're going to be discussing the big picture of e-learning and the specific components that will make up your high level strategy for e-learning creation. So what we just covered, these things, what are indicators of high quality e-learning? So we're about to go into components, which is what are the pieces I should be thinking out of as an e-learning developer or instructional designer. What are the strategies and the pieces that go into an e-learning project? What we just covered is what makes e-learning good, what makes it effective and engaging, okay? And what drives your methods, what drives your strategy should be focused on a lot of the things that we just covered here, which was incentive and engagement, okay? Incentivizing them, getting them to finish it, and keeping them interested. Content design and structure. Is it organized? Does it flow well? Does it make sense of the flow and the structure? Visual and media design. What are the digital resources that are going into it? Is it functional? Does it look modern? Okay. Technical functionality. This had to do with technology. Is the technology working well for everybody? Or what are some things you need to kind of control or do differently to make sure anyone on whatever technology they're using, as well as internet access, and those kind of things that they can use your course. Assessments and evaluations. We talked about questions and how you develop questions high level again, but thinking about what kind of assessments, quizzes, and evaluations or surveys, what are you putting into your course, okay, and planning for that. And then I just went over that whole big list of additional considerations, which are, I think, still important, but maybe kind of after some of these major areas that we just covered here. All right. Next up, so let's see what's coming up.